Hi, this is National Eagle Radio. We're going to go for about a half an hour. And today I want to focus on an article entitled Walk With Me. It's a quote from God. What do the curses in Leviticus 26 mean for us today? And this is written by Rabbi David Seidenberg, and it's published in the Huffington Post. And the reason I want to read this is because it shows how important the land Sabbath or the Shemitah is. Now, we Church of God people think the weekly Sabbath is important, the fourth commandment, and it is extremely important, and it's very key. But the Seidenberg is saying that the land Sabbath is key to a nation's security on the land, and that's the issue that we are grappling with here in America, because we are headed for eviction. And I've made that, what I've done is I've figured out a timetable for the eviction process. We're right in the middle of it for America and actually the Western nations, the Israelitish nations. And it's based on the land Sabbath, on these 7-year cycles, the Shemitah. The Shemitah is in Leviticus 25, God commands that the Israelites needed to let the land rest for a year every 7 years. After 6 years of planting and harvesting, they had to take a break. It's actually one of those paid vacations, a yearly long vacations, a sabbatical, and just let the land lie fallow for a year. And then God would provide enough food for 3 years. Okay, so that's the land Sabbath. So I've been focusing on this article, my findings here, and it's called End of America Timetable in Leviticus 26, 2001 to 2036. And I'm very confident that, unfortunately, that we are in this eviction process, and that if we don't change, this nation is going to be, according to the scriptures, completely annihilated between 2029 and 2036. It's a 35-year process. That would be the fifth phase, and this process started with 9/11. This is absolutely huge because this shows the key, this article of mine, the key for us reversing this eviction process. It is that the land Sabbath is absolutely the key. Anyway, you can find my article. You can Google it, End of America Timetable in Leviticus 26, 2001 to 2036. You just Google it. It's up there on Google, and it's at my revamped website, which this is a announcement called The National Eagle. The National Eagle. And if you want to get to the National Eagle website, it's at thenationaleagle.com, thenationaleagle.com. And the best way to get there is to put thenationaleagle.com into the address bar of your browser. But anyway, it's kind of new. It's about a week old, and it's actually sort of resurrected because it's my original website that I started back in the 90s. Then I dropped it right around 9/11, actually, as a matter of fact. Okay, also at my website, thenationaleagle.com, there's a link to a website that I built 2 years ago, and it's still not populated. It's called the Philadelphian Network, and it's supposed to be like a Facebook for ex-Worldwide Church of God members. And so if you're an ex-Worldwide Church of God member and you want to get in on the ground floor, it's totally free, okay? But just go check it out. You can register for free and get your friends on there, and you can have your own little Facebook for ex-WCG members. It's I call it a social network for former Worldwide Church of God members. So anyway, okay, that's that. And so I've been talking about this article of mine, End of America Timetable, 2001 to 2036, for at least a couple months, I think. Close to a couple months. So this article, I want to talk about this article, Walk With Me. What do the curses in Leviticus 26 mean for us today? Because this article really opened my eyes. And this man is a rabbi, the author, and so obviously he's Jewish. He looks at things from a Jewish perspective. My perspective is slightly different because I'm a believer in Jesus Christ and the entire Bible, Old and New Testament. But this article is, if he only knew that what he shows here in this article is relevant to the United States. In fact, it's critical that Americans understand this because, as I show briefly in End of America Timetable, in Leviticus 26 article, America is, the descendant of Manasseh, who was adopted by Israel. So it's one of the 12 tribes. Manasseh essentially is one of the 12 tribes. Actually, there's one of the 13 tribes because Israel, Jacob, adopted his son Joseph's grandsons, Ephraim and Manasseh. So are there 12 tribes or are there 13 tribes? Well, in a way, there's both. But anyway, America is, and the other Western nations are the focal point of the Old Testament prophecies because we are the descendants of the nation of Israel. Therefore, we're supposed to be keeping the commandments, including the Sabbath, Friday sunset to Saturday sunset, and the other Sabbaths, including the land Sabbath and the Jubilee, which is a Sabbath, and the annual Sabbaths, the so-called Jewish festivals or the festivals of Leviticus 23. Now, if we would do that, we could save our country. But, we could truly make America great again and greater than it was before. But this has impressed on me how important the Sabbaths are. Leviticus 26 actually begins with, God reiterates the importance of keeping not just the weekly Sabbath, but the Sabbaths. And now this I'm including, this is so exciting for me because I'm starting to see the importance of, the concept of a Sabbath the weekly Sabbath every 7 days, the land Sabbath every 7 years, the Jubilee every 7 sevens or every 7 land Sabbaths. There's a Jubilee. Anyway, right in Leviticus 26 at the beginning, verse 2, God says, "You shall keep my Sabbaths and have reverence for my sanctuary." So that includes all the Sabbaths, the weekly, the annual Sabbaths, the Sabbath that's in a week of years, the land Sabbath, the Shemitah. Okay, I'm repeating myself. So I show in my article at thenationaleagle.com, End of America Timetable in Leviticus 26, 2001 to 2036, that we're in sort of a 35-year eviction process. I mean, it already started. We're right in the middle of it. We're 17 and a half years into this thing almost. So I want to read this article to you by Seidenberg because this shows you how important the land Sabbath is. You've got to apply it to America and the Western nations, and I'm talking the Israelitish nations. America, Canada, British Empire nations, which Canada was one of, which include South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and all the northwestern European democracies, or basically the Western nations. Those are Israelitish. The land Sabbath applies to all these nations. All right, so I'm going to start to read. The book of Leviticus comes to a close with a list of blessing, quote, "If you will walk in my statutes," unquote, and then a list of curses that will befall the people, quote, "if you will not listen to me and you reject my statutes," unquote. What do these curses mean and what can they teach us? It sounds like the message is just that we should be obedient, but that's not what it means. Okay, I'm going to make a comment. Well, it is what it means, but that's not all that it means. You might miss the forest for the trees if you don't know what to look for in the midst of all the curses described in Leviticus 26 and the vows in Leviticus 27. I've got a list of the curses in my article that I already mentioned too many times at thenationaleagle.com. But the very answer to the question is embedded in those blessings and curses. Here's why it's confusing. What the blessings and the curses, or when the blessings and the curses are each introduced, it sounds like they are what happens if we don't keep all or any of the commandments, and it sounds like all the commandments are equally important. Here are the words that introduce each section. For the blessings we read, if you will walk in my statutes and watch over my commandments and do them, then I will give you rains in their season, and the land will give her produce, and the tree of the field his fruit, and you will dwell securely in your land. Now, that looks like sort of a, I don't know what translation that's from, but it's a Jewish translation, or he's translated it himself. And for the curses we read, and if you will not listen to me and will not do all these commandments, and if you will despise my statutes, to not do all my commandments, to break away my covenant, even so will I do this to you. I will set my face against you. And by the way, that was quoting from Leviticus 26, 14 through 17, and then the previous quote was from verse 3 through 5. But the Torah makes clear what the most important commandment is in this same section. Here's another quote. I will desolate the land. Then the land will enjoy her Sabbaths. All the days of her desolation she will rest. What she didn't rest in your Sabbaths when you were dwelling on her. That's interesting that God is referring to the land as, or in the female gender, her. She will rest. Okay, that's from verses 34 and 35. Okay, it's the commandment to give the land rest through the observance of Shemitah. That's a Jewish word. Through the observance of Shemitah, or sabbatical years. Years of release every 7th year when the land was not farmed, and through the 7th 7 of the Jubilee year when everyone returns to their ancestral lands and to an intimate relationship with the land. This is what it's talking about, an intimate relationship with the land. When God in Leviticus invites us to, quote, walk in my statutes, unquote, it means walking and living in harmony with the rhythms and needs of the land. Okay, I'm going to continue. The Torah also makes it clear through the whole list of curses that what is at stake is the relationship between humanity and the land. The curses proceed in stages. If you won't listen, then this will happen. And if you still won't listen, then the next thing will happen. Since the fundamental aspect of our relationship with the land is that she feeds us, the curses describe the unraveling of that relationship marked by how we eat and who eats whom. It's easy to overlook this progression since this thread gets woven in and out with other threads, but here's what it looks like when we pull it out. All right, now here the author lists 6 phases of the reversal of this relationship between men and the land for disobeying the land Sabbath. And the first 5, in fact, all 6 of them line up with, the 5 sections of my chart in my article that you should be looking at. I mean, you could just go there right now and you could follow along. You go there at thenationaleagle.com. But here's the first phase. And according to my chart, this is 2001 to 2008. You will sow your seed for emptiness, for your enemies will eat it. It's verse 16. Second phase is 2008-2015. You will completely use your strength for emptiness, for your land will not give her produce, and the tree of the land will not give his fruit. That's verse 20. Now, here's the third phase. I will send out against you the wild animal of the field, and then in parentheses, who is supposed to share in the Sabbath produce of the Shemitah year, and she will make you childless. Okay, during the Shemitah, that's verse 22, during the Shemitah year, when the land lay fallow for a year, that was supposed to be an opportunity for the wild animals to eat freely of your produce. Okay, fourth phase, verse 26. You will be gathered like a harvest into your cities, and I will break the staff of bread against you. You will eat and you will not be satisfied. So here's famine. Here's the fourth phase. This would be 2022 to 2029. This is when the 4 horsemen ride. War, disease, famine, death, conquest. This is coming up in a short 3.5 years if we don't repent. The previous phase with the wild animals, that's the phase we're in now. That's 2015 to 2022. All right, fifth phase, verse 29. This would be from 2029 to 2036. You will eat the flesh of your sons and your daughters' flesh you will eat. Okay, and then the sixth phase, this would be 2036 and beyond. You will be lost in the nations, and the land of your enemies will eat you. Verse 38. In summary, your enemies will eat your food. Here it is. He goes over these 6 phases again. And this shows, he's going to show the reversal in the relationship between people and the land. So it starts out, we're blessed, we get to eat off the land. When the curse is through, the land eats us. Okay? So here we go. In summary, number 1, your enemies will eat your food, but your land will still produce. 2, then your land will stop producing. 3, then the wild animals with whom you didn't share your land and food in the sabbatical year, they will instead eat you. 4, then you will be gathered like a harvest into the city instead of your grain, and there you will be unable to satisfy your appetite. That was 4. So we're gathered into the cities, the 4 horsemen are riding. Instead of having the grain harvested into the city, will be harvested into the city. And there you will be unable to satisfy your appetite. So it's famine. And number 5, then you will eat your children. Number 6, then a strange land will eat you. You see how there's a total turnaround here? You see how serious this is? This is why we're getting kicked off the real estate. We're in the eviction process. The only way to reverse this is to repent. And I think start keeping the sabbatical years. Everything in Leviticus 25 and in Leviticus 23 and in Deuteronomy 15. All right. Because the Jewish people were in exile for so long, the last curse doesn't seem like the worst one because we love our children. The 5th curse sounds like the worst. But symbolically, if the land eats us, that represents the final step, a complete reversal of the right relationship between the people and the land. Shemitah is the fundamental observance. All other commandments, even though they are important for themselves, also have the purpose of creating a society capable of observing Shemitah. And the Torah told us in last week's portion, according to the date that he wrote this, which was July 16th of 2014. So the Torah portion that he's referring to is Bahar, exactly what the lesson of Shemitah here is. And here's from Leviticus 25, 23 through 24. The land you may not sell permanently, for the land is mine. It's God's land. It's God's planet. For you are strangers and settlers by or with me. So we're just temporary residents here, So in all the land of your tribe possessions, you will give redemption to the land. I was talking about the land Sabbath and the Jubilee, being able to buy back, the family farm, so to speak, if you had to sell it. Redemption, the goal we aspire to for ourselves, is what the land needs from us. If we didn't give the land her redemption, or if we don't give the land her redemption, the Torah tells us what will happen. And if we do give the land her redemption, now here are 3 of the blessings from Leviticus 26, verses 6, 9, and 12. I will set peace in the land, and I will make you fruitful, and I will make myself walk in the midst of you, and I will become Elohim for you, and you will become my people. Elohim is translated God in the Old Testament. But God will also not sell us permanently. Those of you who are left, I will bring that. Here's now the final curse in Leviticus 26 in verse 42. That's when the land is emptied and we are in our enemy's land. Those of you who are left, I will bring into the land of their enemies. Their uncircumcised hearts will be bent to shape, and I will remember my covenant, and I will remember the land. I think this is Seidenberg's, probably his own translation, or it's if not, it's looks like Jewish translation of some sort. All right, so here's the last paragraph. I'm going to skip the next paragraph, but the last paragraph is the purpose of Sinai, and this is getting the law. Remember when God gave the 10 Commandments and the law at Mount Sinai? Was to create a new kind of relationship between people and the land, to walk the talk, to give the land Shemitah, rest and redemption. Let's learn how to walk again. Well, I agree. I don't think there's any other way to make America great again. That's what, I have learned from all this. Okay, so that's the article by Seidenberg. Walk with me. What do the curses in Leviticus 26 mean for us today? Well, what they mean actually is that we are being cursed here in America and the Western nations, other Western nations as well. And the solution is to observe the Shemitah. That's how to bring the curses to a halt. I don't think we're going to do that, but that's the answer. And there are other answers as well, solutions that could be applied, and I'll just mention a few of them. Also, during the land Sabbath, there's supposed to be debt forgiveness in Israel. Okay, that's us. America is Israelitish nation. Okay, lost 10 tribes. Okay, I explained that earlier. So during the Shemitah, during the land Sabbath, you're also supposed to forgive debts. And debt forgiveness would solve our economic problems. And I'll just read the first 6 verses out of the Amplified Bible. At the end of every 7 years, you shall grant a release or remission or pardon from debt. This is the regulation for the release. Every creditor shall forgive what he has loaned to his neighbor, and he shall not require repayment from his neighbor and his brother, because the Lord's release has been proclaimed. Now, what does this say about the banking industry? You know, they'd pretty much be out of business. You know, they'd have to, during the Shemitah, the last one was 2014 fall to 2015, the banks would have had to forgive all the debts. You know, the mortgages, credit card, debts. I mean, our whole... See, everybody would be better off, but there would probably be some pain involved in initially. The fact is, there's plenty for everybody. There's a growing and growing disparity between the rich and the poor. A tiny, tiny percentage of people on the planet own most of the wealth, and then you've got the rest of us, you know, slaves at the bottom. But anyway, okay, I'll reread verse 2. This is the regulation for the release. It's supposed to happen every 7 years. Every creditor shall forgive what he has loaned to his neighbor. He shall not require repayment from his neighbor and his brother, because the Lord's release has been proclaimed. 3, you may require repayment from a foreigner, that's a non-Israelite, but whatever of yours is with your brother Israelite, your hand shall release. However, there will be no poor among you, since the Lord will most certainly bless you in the land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance to possess. If only, here's verse 5, if only, if, the big if only you will listen to and obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all these commandments which I am commanding you today. Okay, now here's the promise. When the Lord your God blesses you, as he has promised you, then you will lend to many nations, but you will not borrow. And you will rule over many nations, but they will not rule over you. So there's a duality here. And the duality is, then you will lend to many nations, and you will rule over many nations. See, the lender or the borrower is a slave of the lender. The lender rules over the borrower. Okay, so let's pull it back here. And what's the big picture? What's going on? Here's what's going on with me. You know, have been, you know, watching, you know, the trees in the forest. You know, you get on the internet, look at the alternative news, which is, by the way, they're trying to phase out, trying to take away our First Amendment rights, basically. And you could see what's occurring in America. But, you know, we have no frame of reference, can't see the forest for the trees. And I think this is the key, you know, the Shemitah year, the land Sabbath, God's timing, his Sabbath and his Jubilee. These are the keys to putting all of this into perspective and getting a frame of reference on what's happening in America and why, and then how to reverse it. You know, the solution is the only solution really is repentance towards God. And I think the key is observing the land Sabbath. Now, what would happen if we just suddenly started to make good on the last Shemitah year? What if we forgave all debts? That would do a lot to free up the economy and get the money flowing again. And it would stop, or at least start to reverse, this horrible downhill slide that we are on, you know, like a toboggan ride going through these curses. And we've got 3.5 years for the next phase kicks in. And the next phase, if you look at my chart, at my article, End of America Timetable in Leviticus 26, 2001 to 2036, it's at thenationaleagle.com. Thenationaleagle.com. Anyway, if you look at my chart here, we're right in the middle of these curses. And the next phase that's due to kick in, if my chart is right, in the fall of 2022, is the Four Horsemen ride. The Four Horsemen ride across America and the Western nations. I put this as conquest, war, food scarcity, disease epidemics, and death. By the way, in this phase we're in now, at the end of this phase by fall 2022, God says, I will make you so few in number that your roads will lie deserted and desolate. It says no more cars on the highway, no more trucks. That's what it seems to be indicating. We'll see, I mean, this is so massive, and like I said, looking at the alternative news, it's just, okay, I know things are getting bad and it seems like things could fall apart at any moment. But so what that does is it keeps us in a constant state of anxiety, not knowing what's going to happen next or when. But at least if you put these events in perspective, if you look at the forest, look at it from God's perspective instead of our perspective, which is just all these trees and you can't see the forest for the trees. But if you look at the whole forest, look at it from God's perspective, you can see God's in charge. He's doing this, and you start pointing fingers. We have to point the finger at ourselves because it's our fault for not obeying God's commandments. We like to point the finger everywhere else. It's this guy. It's, this organization. It's this boogeyman. It's this bad guy. It's this, secret organization, whatever. We're pointing the fingers but ultimately the responsibility lies with us, and ultimately it's God that's bringing the curses upon us. So we need to fear God and become obedient, get into line with his requirements and commandments. And then we can solve the problems that way, not through our own devices. That's the solution. Keep God's commandments. And so if you want to do a Bible study, read Leviticus 26. Read the previous chapter, Leviticus 25, where it talks about the Jubilee and the land Sabbath, the Shemitah. Read Deuteronomy 15. If you hit those 3 chapters, you start to get a picture of what's happening to America and why. Yeah, the thing I wanted to mention, so now that I've put this into perspective time-wise, it gives us a deadline. It's not just, someday I have to repent, or, we have to totally repent by tomorrow, or, it's going to be, decades off. And now we've got a timetable. It's better than not having one. And like I said, we got to repent. In 3.5 years, are these 4 horsemen going to ride across our country and the Western nations? Now, hopefully this, having this knowledge would motivate people and the churches of God, God's people, to act. Okay, so I'm going to keep, God willing, hammering away on this theme. So I'm going to repeat what I said at the beginning of the show, which is go to thenationaleagle.com. And you can read this article, End of America Timetable, in Leviticus 26, 2001 to 2036. You can contact me from this page, send an email. You can go to my other site, which has been sitting empty for 2 years, the Philadelphian Network, a social network for former Worldwide Church of God members. If you're a former WCG member, you can go there. You can register for free and set up a little profile. And it's all private. And if we get 2 or 3 of you in there, then we're starting to build a little family reunion. It's like it's supposed to be Facebook for ex-WCG members. That's the idea. Because we were scattered from the Worldwide Church of God, which was actually a preview of what's going to happen to this country. We're 5th phase of these curses when we're scattered throughout the world. But the Worldwide Church of God members were scattered. It was a spiritual fulfillment of the 2, actually when Solomon's temple, the first temple, was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. What happened in the Worldwide Church of God is a spiritual fulfillment of that. God's church was scattered and destroyed. And if you look, any ex-WCG members, they took down most of the buildings in the Pasadena Ambassador College campus. The administration building's gone, and several other buildings. They built a bunch of condos, and the Ambassador Auditorium is still there. They preserved that so far. But if you look at some of my other articles at the National Eagle, like this one, it says Revelation 7 churches observe the Sabbath. You can see that the Worldwide Church of God is actually a type of Solomon's temple, a type of Jerusalem during that time, and And then in the letter to Philadelphia, they make references to the New Jerusalem. So the Worldwide Church of God is analogous to the New Jerusalem. But now we're in a new epoch, I guess I would call it, in God's church, and that is where we're scattered, but we can connect through the internet, and we can connect in our, independent groups spread all over the place. Okay, probably used up my allotted time, so let's leave it at that. Go to the National Eagle. You can link to the Philadelphian Network and check that out if you want. The Philadelphian Network, that's actually at philadelphiannetwork.com. And to listen to previous shows that I do here every week, you can go to Google National Eagle Radio. That's my YouTube channel at YouTube. Go to YouTube and just put in National Eagle Radio. You can hear previous shows. One of these days I'm going to upload the shows I've done for the last 6 months. I know. I keep saying I'm going to do it. I haven't done it. I don't know why. So anyway, this is National Eagle Radio. I'm out. Go to thenationaleagle.com and read my articles, please.